While the Sharks most likely won't be competing for a playoff spot this year, there's still plenty of ways that this can be deemed a successful season.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is Jay Young, caretaker of The Reef, my personal blog about the San Jose Sharks, and co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be examining ways for the San Jose Sharks to have a successful 25-26 season, despite not competing for a playoff spot or winning the Stanley Cup or anything like that, but other ways where we can see growth and development from this team. So we're going to be looking at the growth of the young players, including most importantly, Macklin Celebrini, Yaroslav Askarov, et cetera, how the team can start to see some success in the win-loss standings, and Mike Grier continuing to build this bad boy. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So we know this Sharks team is realistically not going to be in contention for a playoff spot this year. But that doesn't mean that this can't be a successful season. Like we look back at last year, and yes, they were the worst team in the NHL, but we got some answers last year. We got that we got Macklin Celebrini. He's pretty good. He's going to be very good. We feel he's well on his way to being a foundational piece, the franchise centerpiece, you would say, going forward, right? We got some answers on Will Smith and whether he can, his style of play can make it in the NHL. And the second half of the season was a resounding success, right? William Eklund continued his growth and development. You found some answers among your young players, but there's still plenty of questions. And the team, again, was the worst team in the NHL last year. Like, don't get me wrong. And at some point, you're going to have to start to see some success more success in the win-loss column. But this year's not quite that year, I think, for them to kind of be a push for the playoffs, et cetera, type of team, especially with projected 4 players under the age of 20 or 20 or younger on this roster, right? We talked about yesterday, Michael Misa and his ELC. You have Sam Dickinson, who's going to be competing for a playoffs roster spot. You have Macklin Celebrini, who's 19, and you have Will Smith, who's 20. You have 4 players who could be playing, a lot of minutes, all 20 and under on this roster, potentially, at least to start the season. So, I think that's the number one thing for this season, that the most important thing to make this a successful season is growth, continued growth from your young players. And that's going to be different. Like, each player is going to have different calibrations, right? We don't expect the same thing from Will Smith that we do from Macklin Celebrini. We don't expect the same thing from Michael Misa. It's everybody has their own kind of growth. And, we've talked about it several times, how development isn't linear and it's not the same for everybody, and everybody's going to kind of go at their own pace here. But those are the most important things, though, is getting everyone, all these young players, continually to grow. And we'll start with Celebrini, right? And for him, I think, a successful season is if he firmly entrenches himself as we'll see, top 10-ish center in the NHL, right? The NHL just had their top center rankings, and Macklin Celebrini was 19th on the list. Last time I checked, again, he's played one season in the NHL. That's how much he is, like that's what the expectations are for him now, is that this is going to be not only just like a top center in the league, but like a top player in the league from what we saw last year. So if Celebrini continues his growth and development and continues on the path that we expect him, he's going to be a top 10 center sooner rather than later, right? And a great year this year would firmly entrench him inside that top 10. But if he's in the conversation as a top 10 center in the NHL, I think that's a successful season for Macklin Celebrini. What does that look like? We could be talking about a point per game player. We could, a guy who's a force in all three zones. And we've already seen glimpses of that, especially in the offensive and the neutral zone. And he'll continue to grow in the defensive zone. But I think that those are kind of like, if Celebrini, if this time next year we're, get the NHL's top, 20 centers list, and Celebrini's on the first page, he probably had a really great season and continues his growth and development. Then we're going to be spending all the next offseason talking about, well, how much do you pay Macklin Celebrini? Because he'll be eligible for a contract extension. So it's not just Celebrini, right? Yaroslav Askarov, can he be the guy that we're expecting and we're hoping? And the Sharks paid a small ransom to acquire him. Can he be that guy this season, right? And really kind of firmly establish himself as the Sharks goaltender of not only the future but of the now, right? And kind of take that Dustin Wolf of like type approach of, maybe it's a little, kind of 50-50 to start the season, but by the end of the season, we know it is Askarov's net. There's no denying it. We know Askarov is the clear-cut starter. For Will Smith, right? Are you a center? Are you a wing? Are you an extremely dynamic wing, right? Growth from Will Smith. From William Eklund, growth from him. Okay, now can you be a 70-point player? Now the talent is starting to get better. Can you be that guy who kind of that glue guy on the line, that a high-end glue guy, but that glue guy on the line that whatever you kind of need from the line, he's going to be that line connector. From the defense, can Shakir Mukhamadullin last a full season? Does Sam Dickinson stick around? Like there's plenty of opportunities in growth areas for some of these young players who are going to be part of your key pieces and your foundation and your core going forward. So the goal for this season, a successful season, is to have more answers than questions going into it, right? We just went through a whole spew of questions, right? Didn't even mention Michael Misa. Are you NHL-ready? Are you going to be a center? Can you eventually take the second line center position? Like trying to answer some of these questions because you have natural growth from your young players. That's what makes this a successful season, despite whatever else happens on the ice when it comes to wins and losses. Granted, we want to see more wins this season, and we'll talk about that here in the second segment about playing, more competitive, continuing to play more competitive hockey and turning some of those close losses into wins now. But if you're getting all those wins and it's the veterans kind of leading the way, not to say that, right, we don't want Tyler Toffoli and your Jeff Skinners and your Alex Wenbergs and all these other veterans, having bad seasons. We want them to be good, but we want it to be the young players, again, answering those questions and kind of leading the way and showing why we're going to be so excited about Sharks hockey, not only this season, but for the next decade, right? Because these young players are going to be so dynamic and be these key pieces. And it's not just, again, I love Tyler Toffoli, but right, are we realistically counting on Tyler Toffoli to be here and be a contributing player for the next, decade? No, like we know he's going to be here for the next 3 years, and hopefully he's still really awesome and you can sign him to a contract, another contract after that. But again, right, you didn't lose all these games and draft really high to have guys like Tyler Toffoli just be your best players forever. So while getting more wins is very important, and we're going to talk about that in a second, it's having your young players contribute and be the ones leading the way and continue to see growth from them. So that's the first thing that makes this a successful season, is if, again, young players are answering these big questions and kind of, just more answers than questions heading into next off season. So we're going to be talking about starting to see some more results based things here in just a second. So hang around. College football is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than the energy of tailgates, being in the stands with your fellow fans. The only downside, trying to get tickets, endless queues, hidden fees, and prices that jump up at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives you advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best price with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I've used Game Time a bajillion times. My wife uses it to get tickets for Backstreet Boys, where she had a great time. I use it to get Sharks tickets when my family comes into town. Make it super easy. I like the zone deals. You can pick a section, and Game Time will pick the seats so that way you save big. And it's the fastest, cheapest, and least stressful, way that you can buy tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, before we finish, I do have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us about what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey and get started. Everyone completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. All right. So, yes, most important thing to make this a successful season is continued growth from these young players. I think the second most important thing is to start to see actual results in the win-loss column. Right? You cannot be the worst team in the NHL. You can't three-peat. Right? We know the Panthers are trying to three-peat. The Sharks can't three-peat as well in this category. And I don't think they will. One, I think they made improvements, with some of the players that they brought in. Two, I think the natural growth from their young players. And three, I think the goaltending is just going to be a million times better with Yaroslav Askarov than what we saw post Mackenzie Blackwood last year. And if you have I cannot harp enough just not having Alexander Georgiev in net, how much is going to improve the Sharks experience and trying to win more games. So I think for this year, a successful season, if this team is close to playing 500 hockey, right? Just close to that mark, that's going to be a successful season. Again, for a team last year who was dead last, they won 0.31, their point percentage. So it's how many points they got per game was 0.317. A jump to five, even in the ballpark of 500 hockey. So the Islanders last year hit it perfect 500 hockey. They went 35 and 12. They had 82 points in 82 games. So great job, Islanders. Well, I don't think the Sharks are going to be an 80 point team this year. Even if they're like the Sabres last year, which were 482, right? And they got 79 points. And the Kraken were 463. They had 76 points. If you're even in that range, that's a huge jump from going from 20 wins, 50 losses, and 12 overtime losses to 33 wins or 35, somewhere in that range. That's a big jump. And again, we know how many games this team was 30 plus games last year where they either had the lead late going into the third period and they ended up losing, right? Or there was a tie game late and they end up losing. This team was in a lot of very close games but just weren't able to finish. Enter in again Yaroslav Askarov, Macklin Celebrini, who we're hoping is again in the conversation for a top 10 center in the entire NHL in year 2, right? Michael Misa, some of the veterans that they added, especially along the blue line, Dmitry Orlov, who I think is going to be the Sharks' best defenseman. You have, John Klingberg, who, yes, very much a wild card in what you're going to get with John Klingberg. But if it works out, I think it's going to work out. Nick Leddy, who, last year wasn't as great a season, but missed a ton of time because of injury, and I think was rushed back from his injury for a Blues team that was trying to make a playoff push. So Nick Leddy, fully healthy Nick Leddy. Shakir Mukhamadullin, full-time NHL player now. You have Jack Thompson in the fray. You might have Luca Cagnoni making an impact. Like, there's a lot of reasons for some of those self-inflicted wounds and self-inflicted errors that the Sharks committed last year to not see as many of them, right? And they're still going to have plenty, especially when you have a young roster. Again, 4 players who might be on the roster who are 20 and younger. But I just think there's going to be a lot of room for growth and for improvement. And also Ryan Warsofsky in year 2 of coaching, right, as a head coach in the NHL. You're not going to get as many of the hopefully kind of rookie mistakes from him, right? And hopefully we start to see a better power play and a better penalty kill and better kind of in-game adjustments and, kind of the lineups now that you have a more solidified, view of who your players are, right? And you're not trying to hopefully juggle as many players. You can allow these guys to kind of grow and develop a little bit more and maybe not be as tinkery this year because guys are going to be here and guys who are on the roster now kind of expected to be on the roster for a while, right? And yes, the Sharks are going to trade players this trade deadline and stuff, but a lot of these guys, especially in the forward group, they're on their way to kind of just being here for a while, and I think you're going to hopefully see less turnover in the forward group, and you're going to see less issues with bad goaltending in that, especially with Askarov. And I think Nedeljkovic, if Nedeljkovic can kind of, like we talked about before, if he can just be Vitek Vanacek from last year, like the goaltending is going to improve a ton, especially post what we saw from Mackenzie Blackwood, or what we saw from the Sharks after the Mackenzie Blackwood trade. So I think, again, just being in the conversation of playing 500 hockey should be a realistic goal to make this season successful. And that would, again, put you, if you're picking in that range, that's like 7, 8, 9 in the draft. That's a big jump. And that's a huge improvement, like that we saw from the Ducks, who were, picking top 3. And then we saw that growth and that jump as that team this year was picking. I think they were entered the lottery picking 8th and they ended up picking 10th or whatever. So because of the 2 teams that jumped up. So again, do I expect the Sharks to be a playoff team? No, that's not realistic. But do I expect a lot of those really close losses that they had way too many of last year? And how many times do we come on the podcast and be like, man, this team played really well for 40 minutes and then found a way to lose the game at the end? Hopefully we just have less of those. And this team, instead of being a 40-minute team, maybe they can be a 50-minute team, right? Where you're going to get 50 good minutes of them and then there's going to be 10 bad minutes, which, realistically, that's solid. That is solid with what we've seen over the past couple of years, right? Where the team went from like a 20-minute team 2 seasons ago, where you might get 20 good minutes from them a night, and then you get 40 bad minutes, to last year where you got 40 most of the time. You got 40 good minutes from them, and you got 20 bad minutes. This year, can we be a 50-minute team, right? Yes, they're going to lose games. They're probably going to have their fair share of games that they blow at some point. But can you start closing some of those games out and finishing some of those games off? And, even go back to the beginning of the year, right? The first game of the season when the Sharks had a lead against the Blues, Macklin Celebrini's doing Macklin Celebrini things, and they end up losing that game. Set the tone for the rest of the season. Let's not do that this year. Okay. Let's be just in like somewhere around 500 hockey would be huge. So we're going to talk about the last thing here, what I think will be a successful season. This is really from the Mike Grier angle, right? Of this thing is because again, we're still long-term, future is teal, trying to build this thing. So we're going to talk about that and how Mike Grier can continue to build this here in just 1 second. All right, before we finish up, of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no off season. We're bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter most. The local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, the final thing to make this a successful season is for Mike Grier to continue building, right? Not tearing down, which is what we saw, especially the last 2 seasons, where, it was anything that wasn't bolted, especially the 23-24 season, right? Anything that wasn't bolted down, we're getting rid of, right? And we've seen how much this roster has churned over in the last couple seasons, where William Eklund is now your longest tenured San Jose Sharks forward, and Mario Ferraro is the longest tenured San Jose Shark. Yes, I know Barclay Goodrow has played more games in teal, but he did leave and came back. So that's where the tenured qualifier comes in. But anyway, we're hoping that we're not tearing things down and still be smart. Like, if Jeff Skinner nets you a nice pick, and if you get an offer that's too good for Alex Wenberg, right? And Wenberg says, like, I really don't want to resign here, or right. And like they're going to say, I love it here in San Jose. I'd love to resign. But like when you get them behind closed doors, they're probably going to be like, I want to try to go win, and of course, we know the Sharks probably not winning right now. So, if John Klingberg and Skinner and Wenberg and whoever else of these kind of expiring UFA contracts, like if you can get assets for them, get assets. Yes. But we still want to see pieces coming in that aren't just draft picks, right? And if Mike Grier can go out and find or acquire young players who are NHL players now or soon to be NHL players, I think that'd be a successful season, right? And especially if you can solve that long-term first pairing right-handed defenseman. Right. If Mike Grier can solve that issue with a guy who's going to be playing NHL games now or next year, that would be a massive, massive success. That does feel like it's the last piece, right? Is that top pairing right-handed defenseman. And yes, like the Sharks are still going to draft pretty high next year, and there's plenty of great players in next year's draft. Whether it's Veerhoff or whoever, like there's a bunch of great players in next year's draft who you feel like are going to be high quality picks, blue chip prospects, right? But again, like the tanking days are done, guys. And yes, there's going to be a segment of fans who are just like, one more tank. But what's going to happen, right? Is we tank next year, and then people are going to be like, man, that Landon Dupont, man, if the Sharks can get Landon Dupont, and then there's another guy after that, right? And then another guy after, at some point you got to start doing something. And while, again, we want Mike Grier to continue to build, I just think you have to start getting guys who are going to help your young players right now, right? Your Celebrinis and your Smiths and your Eklunds and your Askarovs. Like we can't keep picking, going back to segment 2, right? We can't keep being the worst team in the NHL and picking that high, because you're going to start to kind of age out of these contracts, right? As weird as it sounds, like, Eklund's going to be starting his second contract here soon. You're going to have to pay Smith and Celebrini here really soon. Mukhamadulin's going to be due for a rate. Like, you're going to have to start paying these guys and kind of saying, this is my team, right? These are the guys I'm going with. And they're going to start winning more games for you that you can't just continually tank forever, because I think Celebrini's too good for you to tank forever. And I think Will Smith's going to be really good. And I think Michael Misa's going to be really good. And I think Askarov's going to be extremely good. So they're going to just start winning games for you. So I think, well, yes, I do think the Sharks are picking top 10 this year. I would like to go into the draft with just pick the very best player available, which is what you should do anyway, and not pick for need, because your needs constantly change. So if Mike Grier can continue to build, acquire a top pairing right-handed defenseman, which players, these do not grow on trees, right? And teams do not want to give them up. But if you can get one, and you can continue to add, and if maybe you have to consolidate some of your picks and prospects a little bit, you're going to have to give up something for them. But I want to see Mike Grier starting to add pieces that are going to help the Sharks sooner, not only sooner rather than later, but long term. Like, start getting Celebrini and Smith and these guys some help for next year. So next year we can talk about, hey, can the Sharks be that sneaky wildcard 2 team, right? Going into the 26-27 season, right? Can the Sharks be last year's Canadians or last year's Blue Jackets team that, Canadians just get into the playoffs, or the Blue Jackets who just missed the playoffs? Like, can the Sharks start being that team as soon as the 26-27 season, because of, one, the growth of your young players, two, they started taking that natural step of winning hockey games, right? Because you can't go from being dead last. It's really hard to go from being like one of the worst teams in the NHL to being a playoff team. It's really, really hard to do that. You usually see steps, right? And again, look at the Canadians. They went from one of the worst teams in the NHL to kind of playing 500 hockey to making the playoffs last year, right? The Blue Jackets, kind of saying one of the worst teams, bigger step last year where they were, a team that was in the playoff hunt. Now a team that's, kind of expecting to make a big playoff push next year. Like, there's the Ducks, right? One of the worst teams in the NHL, playing 500 hockey last year. Now expected to kind of make that push for the playoffs. So I think if all these things happen, right? If Celebrini continues to be Celebrini, you see continued growth and development, and from your young players, Askarov just basically writes his name in permanent marker by goalie 1 by the end of the season. This team starts to win more games, and it's the young players kind of leading the way. And Mike Grier continues to build this thing for the future. And that future's starting to get here sooner than later. I think those are the hallmarks of what I think will be a very successful season for the San Jose Sharks this year. So it's gonna be a lot of fun this year. Like, I'm super excited about this year, because I think we're going to see just more competitive hockey like we saw last year. But I think we're going to start to see that turn into more wins, and Askarov every night, or Askarov every other night to begin the season, and playing a bunch of games, and Misa and Dickinson and all these guys starting to make an impact. Like, this season's going to be a blast. So make sure you're following along, of course, wherever you get podcasts. Watch on YouTube as well if you haven't subscribed. We're getting close to 5,000. Like, I haven't said it yet, but I'm saying it right now, I would love to hit 5,000 subscribers by the start of the season. So if you haven't yet, now's the time to do it. Hit that subscribe button, as we're going to start getting to daily podcasts again sooner than you think. So make sure you're following along all those places. You can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. Again, Hans Moleman with the skateboard. Cowabunga, eat my shorts. We're helping to push the TikTok. So follow me on Twitter and Facebook Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Until later. Bye, friends.